So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Law and Partnership. My name is Attorney Jennifer Cruz. You can simply call me Jen, and I will be your lecturer for ActReg1. So, we'll start with the Law and Partnership. So, the Law and Partnership covers 101 articles from Article 1767 to 1867, but please do not be overwhelmed as we will be discussing this um, in chunks that are actually more feasible. So we will not do this in one sitting. So I've already uploaded files in our AnimoSpace account in our course. I have uploaded a syllabus so that I will be following that syllabus. It already includes the which week number. So this is for week 1. And I've also uploaded notes or a framework on the law and partnership. Both the syllabus and the notes on law and partnership was actually created by attorney Reginald Laco, who is also an alumni of LaSalle. So please pardon my diction. I'm actually wearing dental expanders right now. So I have created this video so that we can refer to this for review, or you can watch it whenever you are whenever it is most convenient for you because of the pandemic. And with the upcoming typhoon, it is understandable that it might be difficult for us to always hold synchronous classes because your internet or my internet may be intermittent. So let's proceed. Under Article 1767, it defines a law on partnership. So by the contract of partnership, two or more persons bind themselves to contribute money, property, or industry to a common fund with the intention of dividing the profits among themselves. So a second definition is where two or more persons form a partnership in the exercise of a profession. So this definition actually takes the viewpoint of a contract. So we are using the mercantile view of partnership where we treat it as a juridical or legal person versus a common law view where a partnership is not a separate person. But let's get into that later. So for those who are reading or using Attorney De Leon's Law on Partnership, if I may explain, you will see there a part where Attorney De Leon says that a partnership is a midpoint between two extremes of the organizational form, a single proprietorship and a corporation. While that was true before, because before, a corporation must be created by 5 or more people, so a partnership is in the middle of 1 and 5, that distinction is not necessarily true anymore. Under Republic Act 11232 or the Revised Corporation Code, a corporation can now be created by one person. So I just want to make that clear for those who are using Attorney De Leon's book. For the rest of you, given the pandemic, I will not be requiring you to buy a book. So the notes and this lecture hopefully will be enough for us for this semester and also for the board exams. And of course, when you start practicing, if you decide to practice as CPAs or if you decide to do your own business. So under Article 1767, as I have said, it is a contract between two or more persons. So here is a person. So when you say person, it can be a natural or artificial person. Technically speaking, there is no prohibition for a corporation to be a partner. But in the Philippines, it must be expressly authorized by law. Right now, we do not have a law that allows a corporation to act as a partner. So I'm just making that clear. And I will explain later why. So the second definition under 1767, it says there that a partnership can be used in the exercise of a profession. So here's a picture of professionals. So a profession is a calling, a group of men or women pursuing a learned art in the spirit of public service. The reason why there is a separate definition is because the first paragraph says, if I may repeat it, in the first paragraph, they contribute money, property, or industry with the intention of dividing profits. So the purpose of the first paragraph is to create a commercial partnership. Now, in the second paragraph, the exercise of a profession is not for the purpose of earning money. It is actually for the purpose of public service. So you may be asking, I know a lot of lawyers and doctors, some of them are relatives who are earning more than decent money. Now that is incidental to public service. Really, the profession is supposed to be first and foremost a vocation, service. So the second paragraph pertains to a general professional partnership because the practice of a profession is not a business or enterprise for profit. This is also the reason why the practice of profession cannot be through a corporation, because in the practice of profession it is highly regulated. There are certain qualifications for professionals like good moral character or a particular college degree, which a corporation cannot do. So if I may distinguish a partnership from other forms of partnerships, like a conjugal partnership of gains, a conjugal partnership of gains is only for future spouses, whereas in a partnership it is two or more persons. So since a conjugal partnership of gains is for future spouses, those in the LGBTQI plus community cannot enter into a conjugal partnership of gains. If I may just add before I continue with this table, a conjugal partnership of gains is actually for those who got married before 1988 or before the effectivity of the family code. That was automatic. If your relatives got married before 1988 and there is no agreement as to how they will share in their property, it is a conjugal partnership of gains. Now, for those of you who want to get married later on, you can still agree on conjugal partnership of gains, but you need to create your own agreement stating na us as husband and wife want to use conjugal partnership of gains. Okay. Now, I'll go back. As to the laws, for a partnership, the law in a partnership is what they agreed upon. So, since you have already discussed under your law on obligations and contracts, the contract is the law between the parties. So, that's what they will follow. For partnership of gains, conjugal partnership of gains, it is actually Articles 105 to 133 of the Family Code. As for the commencement date, a partnership starts at the execution of contract. Now, I have put here an asterisk because it is not an absolute rule. Since the parties can actually agree on anything, they can even agree to start a partnership at a later date after the execution of the contract. But we will discuss that later on. Whereas in a conjugal partnership, it should start at the celebration of marriage only. It cannot be at a later date or at an earlier date. Number 4, the purpose. In a partnership, generally it's to obtain profits or in the exercise of the profession, whereas in a conjugal partnership, it is to regulate the property relations, not to regulate your marriage like how you love each other, just how you regulate your property. I don't say properties, if you may be wondering, because I'm old school. There's actually the plural of property is pieces of property. Yeah. So, number 5, for the distribution of profits. In a partnership, it is by agreement or in proportion to the contribution, which we will discuss later on. Whereas in a conjugal partnership, the distribution of your profit, if the marriage ends, is equally only. In terms of management, all partners can equally manage the partnership unless a manager is appointed in the Articles of Partnership, and we will again discuss that later. Whereas in a conjugal partnership, both spouses will manage, but in case of a disagreement, the husband's decision prevails. If it may, for some of you might think it's unfair, because the family code was created in 1988, it was not as progressive as we are now. So until they pass an amendment to that law, this is still what we follow for conjugal partnership of gains. Now, for the disposition of shares, A partner may actually sell, dispose, or assign their shares in the partnership without the consent of others. Whereas in a marriage, you can never dispose of your shares during the marriage. Now, partnership versus a voluntary association. A partnership, as we have already discussed, has a separate juridical personality, whereas a voluntary association, there's an I here, does not have its own personality. So the purpose of a partnership is to obtain profits or exercise a profession, whereas in a voluntary association, the objective is normally lacking. Now, for contribution, as we have said, a contribution in a partnership is money, property, or industry, whereas in a voluntary association, although some may require you to pay, it's not really an investment. It's actually more to defray expenses. So usually, there's no contribution. As to the liability of the partnership assets must first pay its liabilities before the partner's personal property. Whereas in a voluntary association, because it has no separate personality, then whatever liabilities the association may incur will be paid by the members' individual property. So how about joint ventures? Has anyone heard of the term joint ventures? I'm sure you have. The question is it a partnership or not? As we have said a while ago, if you remember the slide with the cute little man, a partnership can be formed by persons. Now, a joint venture, for those who are not familiar, can actually be formed by a corporation. So, if you look at it, since a joint venture can be created by corporations, then automatically it's not a partnership in the legal sense of the term. However, the Supreme Court was confronted with this issue in at least 2 instances. So this is the Supreme Court where I work now. So the first case is Marsman versus Philippine Geoanalytics Inc. or PGI and Gutesco. In that case, the Supreme Court said a joint venture is a form of partnership and shall be governed by the laws of partnership. It says here it is a form. But technically, in the strictest sense, it's really not a partnership per se. Now, the reason why the Supreme Court had to make this pronouncement, because it is inevitable that there will be cases or disagreements wherein a joint venture is involved. And now, whenever the court is called to decide upon a disagreement, the court needs a law to apply it. So the Supreme Court said, to be fair, to be equitable, we will use the law on partnership since there's no current law on joint ventures. For those who want to learn more about this case, but this will not be asked in a test. In this case of Marsman kasi, Marsman and Gutesco entered into a joint venture to construct a building in Makati. So they hired PGI to do some subsurface soil exploration. So they have to test if it's viable to construct a building in accordance with their specifications. Now, PGI actually did not finish all its tasks, but it did some. So it was asking both parties to the joint venture, Marsman and Gutesco, to pay them around more than $500,000, which the joint venture failed to pay because the building project did not push through. That was around 1997 when it was still the Asian crisis, so most businesses were affected. So now PGI filed a collection case seeking for the payment of more than $500,000 from the joint venture. Marsman was actually trying to avoid liability and said, no, it's Gutesco under the agreement who will pay for all the expenses. The Supreme Court said, no, it's not Gutesco but the joint venture, because as I've said, joint venture will be governed by the laws of partnership, and under the law of partnership, it has a separate juridical entity. Yeah. And the second case, Nara Nickel. Now this is involving mining rights. The petitioners here are 3 domestic corporations: Nara Mining, Tesoro Mining, and MacArthur Mining. Now, they were applying for a mining, what do you call this? let me look at my notes. They were actually getting a mineral production sharing agreement, or MPSA, in Palawan, because Palawan is rich with natural resources aside from Mindanao. So Redmond is another Philippine company that actually wanted to deny na the petitioner's MPSA. Redmond was saying these three corporations are actually dummies. They are actually held by a Canadian corporation called MBMI. It is a 100% owned Canadian, MBMI. Now the DENR sided with Redmond. They denied it. So eventually it went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, although the issue was different, no? It was about determining whether the composition of the petitioner's companies was actually a Filipino or foreign company, using the grandfather rule, which you will learn if you decide to go to law school. But in this case kasi, what happened was that in MBMI's summary of significant accounting policies, or syempre it's a note to financial statement, I hope I'm correct, it stated in its notes that these companies are actually held by MBMI. It had 60 to 60.4% ownership. So because of that, the DENR took that as an admission that it was really MBMI that had the power to control these three. And this is important because in the Philippines, only Filipino persons, so Filipino corporations or Filipino natural persons, can be involved in exploration of natural resources. So what happened was, in that case, the Supreme Court said, aside from repeating what it said in Marsman, joint ventures are akin to partnership. Therefore, whatever admission MBMI has will bind its partners. Under the rules of court, an admission by a partner will bind the others. It's a very simple case. I hope I did not confuse you. So, now that we have compared a partnership to conjugal partnership of gains, voluntary associations, and joint ventures, we should look into the effect of creating a partnership. Excuse me. Under Article 1768, the partnership has a juridical personality separate and distinct from that of each of the partners, even in case of failure to comply with the requirements of Article 1772, first paragraph. Now, for now, no need to memorize what this is, 1772. But right now, what's important is that it is a separate juridical personality. That's why in the picture here, they're separated. So, this separate juridical personality was also mentioned in Article 44.3 of the Civil Code. No need to memorize. I just want to write it down for those who want to know. Where Article 44 enumerated juridical persons. Under number 3, it's corporations, partnerships, and associations. So you might ask, so what if it's a separate juridical entity? Under Article 46, because of its separate juridical personality, they can now acquire and possess property of all kinds, as well as incur obligations, bring civil and criminal actions. So, separate from its owners. Now, for the law on partnership, there is also an equivalent. Article 1774, which we will discuss later. Any immovable property or interest therein may be acquired in the partnership name. Meaning, if the partnership decides to purchase property, like land, the deed of the title, the TCT, Transfer Certificate of Title, or the OCT, will be under the name of the partnership and not anymore the individual partners. But don't worry, as I've said, we will discuss this later. Now that we know a partnership as a separate entity, it will be important to know when a partnership is created. So, that's why I put Frankenstein, because Frankenstein is just a creation. So this reckoning point will determine the partners' liabilities to each other and their liabilities to third persons, as well as knowing when to start computing for the partnership's income or loss. So under Article 1784, a partnership begins from the moment of the execution of the contract unless it is otherwise stipulated. When you say unless it is otherwise stipulated, unless the partners agree that we will begin a partnership at a later date. Yeah. So now that we have dissected the definition of a partnership under Article 1767, we now extract or get the 5 essential features looking at that definition. So there are 5, as I've said. There. Number 1, there must be a valid partnership contract. So for those who are reading De Leon, although I'm not requiring it, De Leon created another feature which I think should be part of number 1 here. De Leon said that the parties must have legal capacity to enter into a contract. So it's part of it because if the parties don't have capacity to enter into a contract, then there's no valid contract. No? If you remember your lessons under obligations and contracts, under Article 1318, and I'll write it down just for reference, a contract, there is no contract unless the following requisites concur. 1, the consent of the parties. 2, an object certain. And 3, the cause of the obligation. So since the partnership is contractual, all the requisites of a valid contract must be present under 1318. So when you look at it, there must be a valid contract. It did not state if it's written or oral, meaning it can be informally created by mere verbal agreement. Let's create a partnership. Okay, do you have a partnership already? Let's when I say, let's do business and let's share in the profit, then okay. But if I say, let's create a partnership, and you just said, okay, wala pang partnership yun. There's no partnership yet. So it may be informally created and its existence proved by the conduct or the acts of the parties. If there's no written agreement, look at how they act. Are they acting as if they're already doing business together and that they plan to share in the profit? Although it is normal and it is customary to embody the terms of your agreement in a document known as the Articles of Partnership. Although it is customary to have an articles, please pardon my penmanship, it is not required. So since it is contractual, there is no such thing as a partnership by law. Because that means you don't need consent. Also, religious societies, conjugal or community partnerships are not under the law on partnerships. Number 2, the partnership must have a mutual contribution of money, property, or industry to a common fund. Money refers to legal tender, meaning banknotes or coins. So checks, drafts, and promissory notes are actually part of property, personal property. When you talk about property, it can be real, like land, or personal property. And industry means work or services of the party, which may be either manual services, or intellectual, like your expertise. So the law does not specify what type of industry one may contribute. So when you talk about property, if I may go back, property here, it may be real or personal, tangible or intangible, such as goodwill, or incorporeal rights, such as credit rights, which I'm sure you already know by now since you're already in your 3rd year. However, I will put an asterisk here because a limited partner cannot contribute industry alone. They must contribute either cash or other property. That's under Article 1845, which we will discuss later on, probably in the 3rd week. Number 3, A partnership must have a lawful object or purpose under Article 1770. A partnership must have a lawful object or purpose and must be established for the common benefit or interest of the partners. When the unlawful partnership is dissolved by a judicial decree, the profits shall be confiscated in favor of the state, without prejudice to the provisions of the Penal Code, governing the confiscation of instruments and effects of the crime. When we talk about the revised Penal Code, I just want to discuss it, but I will. It's not. I don't think it will be asked. When you talk about the Penal Code, this is the revised Penal Code, particularly Article 45, where it says that the penalty imposed in committing an offense will carry with it the forfeiture of the proceeds of the crime and the instruments or tools which were used. These proceeds and instruments will be confiscated in favor of the government unless they be the property of a third person not liable for the offense. But those articles which are not subject of lawful commerce shall be destroyed, meaning if you decide, for example, to do a business of selling shabu, obviously it is illegal, so the proceeds, whatever money that you have contributed to purchase things for the business of making and selling shabu, they will be confiscated. Even the tutor, even the chemicals will be confiscated. The drums, the tin foils. I know this because I have so many criminal cases that I write, not my personal cases. But if a property, for example, the car that was used to transport the drugs, if the car is in the property of a third person who is not liable, meaning that person absolutely has no idea they were using it for drugs, then he or she can take it back. But for example, an innocent, quote unquote innocent person owns shabu, of course the government will confiscate that. Technically, you're not innocent. You know it's illegal to have shabu in the Philippines, or I guess anywhere else in the world. Yeah. So, I just wanted to, for your information only. So, therefore, while the parties possess absolute freedom to choose the transactions they engage in, generally, the only limitation is the legality of the object. So, this is a general rule, and we will discuss the exceptions. I will go over them now. There are certain objects, though not inherently immoral, murder, theft, robbery, it's obvious. Others are by law illegal. For example, in banking, under banking, General Banking Act, a bank cannot be formed by a partnership, only a stock corporation. What else? Under the revised Penal Code, creation of monopolies is not allowed, or combinations in restraint of trade. Gambling is not allowed. Smuggling, or leasing apartments to prostitutes, or to prevent competition in bidding for government. I won't write that down anymore. I just want you to know. Number 4, a partnership must be established for the common benefit or interest of the parties, which is to obtain profits and then divide the profits among themselves. So this feature, number 4, will distinguish it from religious, civil, and social organizations, because these religious, civil, and social organizations are not primarily for profit. They're not actually for profit at all. When we talk about number 4, we're talking about partnership under number 1, commercial partnership, not the practice of profession, So the question is, what if the partnership is in the red or is operating at a net loss? Even if the partnership becomes unprofitable, as long as their main goal is to obtain profits, then there is a partnership. Because it's no one is 100% sure that every business enterprise you will enter into will always earn money. Sorry if I'm emphatic. I'm afraid that I might be too monotonous and help you fall asleep. Yeah. So, under Article 1797, let me write that down for you. And we will discuss this later, that's why I didn't type it down. The losses and profits shall be distributed according to the agreement of the partners. But, if the partners only made an agreement as to how profits will be shared, then the law and the losses, there is no stipulation as to how losses will be shared. Under 1797, we will use the same profit sharing ratio as that in the sharing of profits. Now, what if there's no stipulation on profits and losses? Under 1797, it states if there's in the absence of stipulation, the sharing for the profits and losses shall be in proportion to what each partner contributed. So, the industrial partner shall not be liable for losses because they contributed services. As for profits, the industrial partner will receive a share. But, if the industrial partner is also a capitalist partner, meaning that partner also contributed capital aside from services, then that partner will receive profits in proportion to his capital also. This is because the right to share in the profits carries with it the obligation to share in the losses. We will discuss this later when we talk about the obligations of partners in a separate video. I have a caveat, meaning a warning. Under this Article 1797 on the profit sharing ratio is not equal to Article 1799 of the Civil Code. Under Article 1799, a stipulation which excludes one or more partners from any share in the profits or losses is void. Meaning, if there is an agreement where, say, a partnership between A, B, and C will not share in the profits or losses, the partnership is still valid, but that particular agreement is void. Yeah. So, therefore, 1797 talks about the sharing of profits and losses. Careful, another caveat. The realization of the profits need not be the exclusive aim of a partnership. For example, I plan to sell biodegradable N95 masks. Of course, I want to earn money. But if I say, really, one of the reasons why I created this partnership is because I don't want landfills to be choking with, these surgical masks that we use every day because of the pandemic. Where, if you see in pictures right now, seagulls are being entangled on because it's not biodegradable. You cannot say that my partnership, if I do this with, say, B or A, another partner, the partnership is still valid because my primary aim is to earn money. My secondary aim is to save the earth. So that's just an example. So another caveat, the fact that there is a sharing of profits between two or more persons does not mean that there is automatically a partnership. And I will discuss this later when we get to Article 1749 of the Civil Code. So I will end this video because that ends 1.1 of the syllabus or the definition of partnership. So please click on the next video where we will discuss 1.2 or the characteristics of contract of partnership.